This is a forgotten story of D-Day, involving one of Britain's most unusual military units. The Inns of Court Regiment had somewhat peculiar origins way back in the 16th century. The Inns of Court are 4 professional associations for barristers in England and Wales. A barrister is the English term for a courtroom lawyer. Even today they wear black robes and white horsehair wigs. In the 16th century, judges and lawyers were required to perform military service to the Crown, helping to defend the area of London containing the Inns of Court. This tradition was slowly formalised down the centuries until a regiment of lawyers was founded as part of the reserve forces, full-time lawyers who were also part-time soldiers. After many name changes, the Inns of Court Regiment emerged in London in 1932, following valiant service by earlier incarnations of the unit in World War I, where 3 members had won the Victoria Cross. They had long before acquired a very cool nickname. When King George III was told the unit was composed of lawyers, he quipped, "Ah, the Devil's Own," and the name stuck. Which brings us to World War II. On the outbreak of war in 1939, the reservists were called up, and the Inns of Court Regiment became a frontline cavalry unit equipped with armoured cars and scout vehicles. They were earmarked for the D-Day landings in June 1944. One of the major problems for the Allies on D-Day was to prevent German reinforcements from quickly reaching the landing beaches and pushing the British, Canadians and Americans back into the sea. Behind the British and Canadian beaches lay the city of Caen, and south of Caen were the Orne and Odon rivers. German reinforcements pouring into the invasion zone would have to cross many bridges over the 2 rivers to reach the front, and these bridges became the focus of British planning. The first Allied action on D-Day was Operation Deadstick, the British glider assault on Pegasus and Horsa bridges over the Caen Canal and Orne River respectively. The objective was to capture these road bridges, providing British forces with an eastwards exit off Sword Beach, and if this failed, destroy the bridges to prevent German armoured reinforcements arriving from the east. The British 3rd Parachute Brigade dropped and destroyed the 5 bridges over the River Dives, but that still left 13 bridges over the Orne and Odon rivers. This is where the Devil's Own came into play. A daring plan was put together to seize and destroy these bridges by a risky but undeniably ballsy operation by C Squadron, the Inns of Court Regiment. The Devil's Own, working in concert with a detachment from the Royal Engineers, would land on the Canadian beach Juno, just behind the first wave. They would then dash off the beach into the countryside behind the German lines, split into small groups, and go hell for leather for the bridges, racing up to 30 miles inland. Once they had destroyed the bridges, they were to link up with elements of the British 6th Airborne Division that was driving south from their drop zones east of Caen, or, conversely, link up with British and Canadian troops advancing from the beaches. The Devil's Own would need the Devil's Own luck to pull this operation off, as they would be on their own deep behind German lines, outnumbered, outgunned, and often out of contact. The Inns of Court's C Squadron was assigned 2 landing craft for the operation. The squadron was divided into 12 half-troops, each consisting of 1 Daimler armoured car and 1 Dingo scout car. 9 of the half-troops would each have 1 half-track attached from 7-3 Field Company Royal Engineers, packed with boxes of explosives and engineers to deal with the bridges. It was very risky. 9 of the groups consisted of just 3 vehicles in each column. And as for firepower, it was, to say the least, limited. The Daimler armoured car had a crew of 3 and was armed with a 2-pounder quick-firing gun, basically a 40mm anti-tank gun that was not much use against the German tanks they would probably encounter. Secondary armament was a single 7.92mm Besa machine gun and 1 Bren light machine gun that could be used in the anti-aircraft role. Top speed was 50 miles per hour and armour was between 7 and 16 millimeters. The Daimler Dingo Crew 2 was a light and fast four-wheel drive scout and liaison vehicle. Armament was a single Bren gun. Capable of 55 miles per hour, its low silhouette was perfect for reconnaissance missions. The landing place selected was a mile west of Grès-sur-Mer on Juno Beach, 14 miles west of Ouistreham at the mouth of the Orne River. The Devil Zone would land alongside the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division 35 minutes after the start of the assault at 0735 hours. The two landing craft carrying the vehicles approached the beach side by side, one landing all its waterproof vehicles without incident. The landing point in front of high sand dunes for safety. The second landing craft struck a mine on the run-in, then backed into another mine as it manoeuvred, one dingo having its suspension ruined. It was tipped into the sea to make way for the other vehicles to exit, but when the ramp went down, the water was too deep for the two half-tracks aboard to make it to shore. Unloading was delayed for 6 hours until the tide receded. The vehicles from the first landing craft had already started off on their missions. 2 tracks off the beach had been cleared by Canadian flail tanks, but not completely. 2 dingoes running over mines and were knocked out. Fighting with defensive German forces continued, and an anti-tank gun knocked out one of the Royal Engineers' half-tracks. Pushing on behind the beach, another half-track was knocked out by fire from a German bunker. The remaining vehicles pressed ahead, fighting through groups of German infantry, snipers, anti-tank guns, and even the odd German tank. They would soon be joined by the rest of C Squadron from the second landing craft. C Squadron reached Tiersville, 5 miles along the road from the beach. It was now that the remains of the squadron divided into the assaulting half-troops. German opposition was becoming heavier. By evening on the 6th of June, 4 of the half-troops had reached the railway line that ran between Bayeux and Caen, 11 miles from Juno Beach. Here they stopped for the night. Another group pushed across the River Seulles and met Canadian infantry with tank support. The Inns of Court Regiment's vehicles were painted black with ID markings. This would prove to be a problem. In a tragic friendly fire incident, the Inns of Court vehicles were mistaken as German, and one armoured car was knocked out by a Canadian tank, killing 2 crewmen. By the end of D-Day, the Devil Zone had lost 3 armoured cars, 3 Dingo scout cars and 2 half-tracks, but were determined to complete their urgent mission. At first light on the 7th of June, C Squadron mounted up and headed out for the Orne River. Fanning out over a wide area, the squadron's half-troops raced for the bridges with the remaining Royal Engineers half-tracks, but German opposition was increasing everywhere. One half-troop actually overran a German artillery battery headquarters, capturing the commanding officer. At Jerusalem Crossroads, 5 miles south of Bayeux, tragedy struck again. 2 half-troops, with their 2 Royal Engineers half-tracks loaded with explosives destined for the bridges, were attacked by US P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers. Despite putting out yellow ground markers and firing yellow flares to indicate that they were friendly, the American pilots ignored the signals from the Inns of Court Regiment. The resulting explosion was so massive that all the British vehicles were destroyed and all the crews were killed and the French hamlet completely demolished. By the 8th of June, hopes of success were nearly gone. German reinforcements were heading towards the Allied beachheads, including the powerful 21st Panzer Division. Tank battles broke out on the Allied perimeter, but the Devil Zone made another attempt to push on, but it was hopeless. On the 9th of June, the remnants of C Squadron were withdrawn and reassigned as reconnaissance units to the infantry coming off the beaches. 1 military cross and 4 military medals were awarded to the fighting lawyers for their brave but doomed attempt to shorten the Battle of Normandy. In 1961, the Inns of Court Regiment was amalgamated with the City of London Yeomanry, and after further reorganisation to the Territorial Army, survives today as 6/8 Inns of Court and City and Yeomanry Signal Squadron, part of 7/1 Yeomanry Signal Regiment, Army Reserve. A small memorial stone at Jerusalem Crossroads marks the regiment's unique contribution to the D-Day landings. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my other YouTube channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.